Thank you everyone for joining us on another edition of ALN Thursday at 3. We've got a special program that is causing me just a little bit of confusion as to how to share all the complexity that we have going on. There's quite a bit of activity around the National Institute of Building Sciences event that is next week. It's the 50th anniversary of an institution established by an act of Congress in 1974. And today we are going to be doing a preview workshop of that event. And we have with us Kimon Onuma, president of Onuma Inc., Cyril Verlet, who is founder and president of CDV Systems, Anto Budiaro, who is the head of a coalition of organizations that have put together their connections to the Internet of Things in a way that is connecting with Kimon Onuma's system. And we've got Zero Gorbiani, who is with National Institute of Building Sciences. It's a packed full-hour show. And the idea of this program, as all of the programs we do with Onuma Inc., is to demonstrate what is valuable to owners. How can owners understand what to specify from the people who are serving them, and how the people of serving them can connect their technology to help us overcome the seemingly untenable problems that all organizations are facing, and we're facing as a single human race. And by rapidly deploying best practices, we might be able to address some of these issues. And Kimon, I'll let you get rolling as soon as possible here. And while Kimon is coming on and firing up, I'll say that all of this starts with the owners being able to identify their mission statements, their objectives, and how the people who are working with them and serving them can create a building process model that can be visualized and achieved. And the visualization tools, the AI tools, the digital twin tools, all these tools are what's helping us be able to address seemingly impossible problems. So Kimon, welcome, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks everybody for being here today. Like Mike said, this is not going to be a normal type of presentation. We actually build it kind of like a workshop. Actually, next week is supposed to be a workshop too, so it's more interactive, and we're going to be doing some things live and jumping around and having conversations. And please post your questions. I guess, Mike, it's okay if people put into the chat, right?
Yes, thank you for reminding me that it's great to have people's chatting, and we're already getting hellos to all of you out there too.
That's great. And we had a session 2 weeks ago where we introduced the Building Innovations Conference. It's happening in Washington, D.C. next week, but we're also going to be virtual. This is actually an important point. A lot of people have asked about this. We have a website for BIMstorm, so those that cannot be there in person, you can actually follow along virtually too. So we'd love for you to be in DC, but everybody can't be in the same place because we're just spread out all around. So join us virtually. It's the only session at Building Innovations that's going to be virtual as well. So please join us there. And we'll put a link into the chat too if you haven't seen it. But if you go to bimstorm.com, like maybe I should just type it in, bimstorm.com.
I just did, Kimon/Bytes.
Good. All right. Yeah, it's called Brains and Bytes. And it's about digital twins and AI. We start with brains because we said the humans are important too. We don't want the AI just to be the primary driver here, even though it's getting a lot of buzz. So that's what this session's about. We're looking at what we're going to do, and we have a great kind of lineup here today, and we'll go over that next. But just to give you an overview, so this is a mural. If you sign up at the BIMstorm site, you can get access to this mural to view what's going on, but we'd love for you to provide content too, whether it's your ideas or graphics or just sticky notes. You'll see there's a lot of stuff happening here. I'm zoomed all the way back here. just to give you a sense of the scale of this, we were just zoomed in on this slide here, but we have sections that were presented last week from Scott McClure from the Digital Twin Integration Subcommittee looking at public perception. So if you go to last week's session, you'll see that. We're also looking at mythbusters. For example, maybe this is a show of hands. Who thinks that digital twins need to be on a single platform? Yes or no? They need to be in one app. It must be a complex 3D model. So we're trying to kind of have a conversation. There's no right or wrong answers here, but we're trying to capture that as well. And just to navigate you around this mural, if we start at the center here, the theme is about BIM and brains and bytes, digital twins, right? And we're breaking it up into 8 main sections. So there's the brains, the people that are involved. There's the bytes and AI, kind of what can AI do with all the data. There are apps involved that help make things happen, obviously. The digital twin, what is that all about? Asset management, which is this is asset leadership network. So there's a focus on that. And Mike, maybe this is a good chance to talk about, well, let me go through the other few and then we'll start with assets and asset management use cases, which Zara and I and others have been working on at the Digital Twin Integration Subcommittee, and a paper is coming out that Zara is leading on. And then industry connections, orgs that are out there, and the brains that are going to be, there's a lot of people kind of jumping in and out at these different sessions and at Building Innovations next week. And then we have links to AI and digital twin related sessions that actually started way back. And the first one was actually Asset Leadership Network, March of 23, where we did the first kind of presentation relating to the use of AI. So if I zoom back here now, Mike.
Yeah, this is perfect, Kimon, because when you zoom all the way back, that's the complexity that the owners are looking at.
Yeah.
And we've got to understand that it's not about the individual tools and processes. Those work. What it is about all the people represented by these complexities coming together to serve the mission of the owner. And when you have a mission focus, the silos that are necessary to zoom down and get work done on the ground melt away, and everyone's just focused on the mission. And that's asset management. Now we zoom into assets, which is different than asset management. Asset management is everything. What is an asset? Well, ISO 55000 identified assets as anything tangible or intangible that gives value to an organization. And the tangibles that we know about are facilities, FF&E, personal property, fleet, IT, etc. And the intangibles are patents and copyrights and brand. But the data about these assets, is that intangible? Yeah, probably. And we can do different links to help the owners understand this big picture and how one asset management strategy helps all these different asset types, which are very typically siloed. So the Asset Leadership Network promotes to owners understanding of a governance system. So you can slide over to the government governance system, and ISO 55000 has a great system. There are multiple systems for governing your asset management. Doesn't matter what you use, just stay focused on mission, organizational objectives, information sharing, etc. And Jack Dempsey, a board member of the ALN, has excellent content about strategies to renew federal facilities, and his own workshop documents. Kimon, if you zoom or move to the right, you can see strategies to renew federal facilities. And then he's got a recent series on behavior management and asset management, because it's really all about human behavior interaction. And when you get this all right, then you have the transparency of data to yield self-correcting behavior, which Admiral Allen told us at the National Academies many years ago. And Nick had thrown in some other things in here that we have. We've looked at this asset issue from the owners of airports and different ways. So we've got tons of resources to help you think this through. But we really want to emphasize that it's solving owners' mission objectives is what this is all about.
Yeah. So the owners are asking the question, they want results. Their use cases relating to, we want to do A, B, and C and achieve these results to manage our entire asset portfolio from an asset management perspective. So even though we're talking about digital twins and AI, we want to, and we've done, like I mentioned, we've done a lot of presentations. Here's how you use AI. Here's how you did. We're going to do a lot of that as well too in these workshops, but we also want to tie it to the overall, why are we doing this and how's it happening? And in fact, the work that Zara and I and many others, so Zara is going to be presenting today, but at the National Institute of Building Sciences, there's a paper that's coming out about digital twin and BIM, the Digital Twin Integration Subcommittee. And one theme that we're going to be focusing on today too is about just kind of from a digital twin perspective, it's really a system of systems, and there's no single application or system that can do everything, because it's really a thread of, you have natural systems that want to connect to cities, that want to connect to a single building, that want to connect to a railroad or a bridge or whatever. It just goes on and on and on, right? So how do we make that happen? And the focus has been on how do we use cases. And Zara, maybe this is a good chance for you to jump in, and I'll let you take over on the screen if you'd like, but that's kind of the starting point, use cases to support these owners that are asking for results for their asset management.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kimon. So as Kimon mentioned, can I share my screen or okay. So as Kimon mentioned, we've done a lot of work in the Digital Twin Integration Subcommittee, and our paper, which focuses on the relationship between BIM and digital twins, will come out shortly. If you're in the Building Innovation Conference next week, we also have a panel discussion on that. I'll put the session link in the chat. And I'm also wearing my Penn State hat from an owner's perspective. So we've worked here a lot on how we define digital twins and what the use cases are for digital twins. And Kimon touched on assets. So this is an interesting point, because we were looking at the definitions, and in the definition of digital twins, we see assets. It can be a single equipment, or we can see it like as the whole building. So we can consider a building an asset too from our digital twin framework. And we are also working on a framework to define or document use cases. So here, this is a work that we are doing, Kimon and I, and also John Messner. So we took the knowledge that we have from the National BIM standard and developed that and used some existing digital twin use case definition frameworks. And we have developed a template to document these use cases so we can share the knowledge and also establish a standardized language so different stakeholders can communicate with each other. So we will be getting into this more in the BIM storm next week. But some of the attributes that we are documenting is what life cycle this use case belong to, what are the key technologies or standards, and what are the inputs and outputs. And related to that, we have also developed a library or a list of digital twin operational use cases here at Penn State. So this is based on what already exists. And of course, this like digital twin use cases are evolving. There will be more use cases, and we will add to the library as they happen. But yeah, we are also working on a paper that will be presented at the joint conference between the Building Smart Summit and CIBW 78. Kimon, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, this is like Zara, like you mentioned, it's a work in progress, but it's interesting that we're not trying to capture all the different use cases possible. We're trying to show some key examples and then be able to build some on the fly pretty much, which is Anto's going to be showing some examples of that. But that's kind of the concept of a digital twin. You can say, okay, I have data from here, I have maps from here, I have BIMs from here. I want to be able to do something new with that and then kind of build it on the fly. But we're trying to create that framework, and goes back to the position paper, right? We want to have a framework that kind of describes that interactivity and the ability to do that. We probably need to even acknowledge that we've referenced a lot of other organizations that have done great work too, like the Digital Twin Consortium and others. So we're trying to, as the NIBS Digital Twin Integration Subcommittee, look at what else is happening in the industry, pull it all together, but look at it from the perspective of NIBS as well too, to create value for the stakeholders that are involved at NIBS.
Yeah, and also from an owner's perspective, we are also looking into how we can tie these use cases to the owner mission and objectives. And I'm looking at Penn State as a case study for that too.
Yeah, that's great. That actually reinforces Mike's point, right? Where this is driven from
Yeah.
an owner needs, right? So there's a lot, and we've all been involved with presentations where we show all the great technologies and all that stuff that we all like to look at the eye candy, which is great. But if you can tie those solutions back to the owner, back to a use case,
then we can have rapid deployment of best practices. And that's one of the great things about NIBS that we totally support is they want to rapidly deploy these best practices. And we believe that an asset management governance system helps all the different silos in the organization be able to use the same type of information sharing standards. So there can be multiple platforms, but the information is put in once and used many times.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then another interesting point that we have discussed is that we also can have different users for different use cases, and the way we define the use case depends heavily on that too. Like if you want just the building occupant to know about it, you don't have to use super technical language.
Yeah.
And we really appreciate NIBS for encouraging this interactive type of workshop to end their 50th anniversary conference next week. Because Zara's a presenter earlier, but she's linking into this presentation, which will be the wrap-up presentation. And then while we're there in person, we're going to be reaching out and engaging others. So I see a lot of people from Washington, D.C. online. Please come to the NIBS conference and talk with us, and let's get you involved in sharing your use cases as an owner or your best practices as a provider.
Yeah, you can either be there in person, or if you can't, like we mentioned earlier, you can, if you go through the site that we mentioned earlier, you can actually log in, get access to this mural. We even have forms where we're just asking 3 or 4 questions. Give us your use case, for example. What are you trying to achieve? That could be a starting point. Or if you have an actual solution or an approach that you want to put into the mural, it can become part of the document. There's too much to present everything, but we're going to be absorbing all this and putting a report together at the end too that's going to be published out.
So published through the National Institute of Building Sciences, but also there's interest from ALN Senior Fellow Marty Rowland to have the results published in his American Journal of Economics and Sociology. And this impacts the economics and sociology of every organization. So it's a perfect fit for that also.
Yeah. So Zara, is it okay if we take the screen back? Is there anything else that you'd like to cover? We'll come back and discuss this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I'm good. Yeah.
So maybe I'll show
Thank
real
you.
quickly and we'll transfer over to Cyril next, but I want to kind of zoom back again before we go to Cyril, if that's okay. Mike, did you want to say anything?
Well, this is just representative of the complexity that asset management is addressing in many ways. We have such an embarrassment of riches in a movement towards understanding and implementing asset management best practices. Right now, at the Society of American Military Engineers JETSI conference, there's asset management presentations going on. And next week, we have a great presentation featuring Chris Silke from Portland, Oregon, with their value and benefits from asset management partners, the Asset Management Council. And it's a meeting with the United Nations. The movement for understanding and accepting asset management at the congressional level is great. We've got 5 meetings set up to share with our senators and congressmen and people what this is and how it means and how they can adjust their legislation to allow this type of good work to happen. So we're excited to and honored to be part of this growing movement.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so now we had Zara focus on the use cases here that support the owner requirements that are going to use a lot of these technologies. Now we're going to move into some specific examples. The examples we're showing, we're trying to get as much live interactivity going rather than just showing images. So in the background, we've been doing a lot of development and testing, and Anto's going to also jump into that as well too. But if we go back to kind of the storyline, we're also looking at process models and capturing concepts of how does this all flow. So for example, at a high level, we're trying to make information machine readable so it becomes accessible in a secure environment, decouple it from applications so it can be accessed by many tools using open standards and open data connections, share the data through APIs, driven by use cases, and the governance and rules that drive that, the public perception we talked about that earlier. We want to connect many systems together, which Anto is going to talk about as well, to enable digital twins that are useful for humans and AI. So that's where we're kind of heading. If we get this data, it's not just for AI to use, it's actually very useful for us too. And this is a perfect chance to get the standardization of information in a format that we've been talking about for decades now, that we need as humans that are working with these tools, but also AI now, if it has structured data, they can start doing more automated things that would make it more useful for us in our decision-making process. So Cyril's going to talk about the beginning of how you start from using standards, whether they're open industry standards or owner-specific standards, and how you drive that into projects to lay the groundwork to move it into the rest of the life cycle. So Cyril, why don't you take over the screen and jump in and tell us a story.
Thank you, Kamon. Let's see here. Let me just connect, share. Let me know when you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to take a perspective of the AEC market. And we've been, CDV Systems is our company, and 26 Degree Software is the software side of CDV. And we've been working with the AEC market for almost 30 years, but 22 years regarding BIM. And we've set up these standards and trained staff and built hundreds of millions of square feet of projects and content, tens of thousands of content components for these amazing AEC clients. And what we found is that owners receive these models and they don't use them. And there's an inherent problem there. It's the structure of the data isn't consistent from one trade to the next. So we took our best practice workflows of, again, working with these amazing firms for the last 22 years and created a kind of data structure that owners can use up front to define what the data structures are. We call it collectus. So if we look at the use case scenarios here, and I'll dig into the collectus in a minute. If we look at the use case scenarios, from an owner's perspective, they have existing content. And from our experience, trying to have owners build BIM models of existing buildings is just the wrong direction to go. Instead, we would suggest that you take an example, a digital twin like Onuma system, and you consolidate a variety of silos that can incorporate Excel files, CAD files, legacy BIM, space data, asset management data and put it into a digital twin. Okay, that's again, this is a perspective of one example of how to take existing data and bring it into a digital twin. The second is for new projects. If the owner would like to try to somehow harvest data-rich BIMs of new projects, then Collectus can be an example of that, meaning defining the data structure, and we'll talk about what I mean by that, into a digital twin. And this workflow could take days to do. This workflow literally we've been proven it can be done literally in hours, where the building is completed, the BIMs are handover, and within hours, the data is absorbed into this digital twin, and then you can start running operations. These are the two use case scenarios, please download them if you want, describing from an AEC perspective, why it would be useful that an AEC firm would want to create a data-rich model at handover for the owner. The other is more proactive by the owner. It's the owner that's driving the requirements and telling the AEC teams, we want you to build data-rich models, and we have a structure that's gonna do just that. Here's the structure, off you go, and we can then validate the models, again, for delivery. So to dig a little bit deeper into this workflow, here, we have the actual workflow here. So we've got CDV systems, Collectus, and on the Collectus structure, there are three distinct steps. First is to define the data structure within a BIM execution plan. We've got the BIMX plan here. We've got diagrams that describe activities that all the stakeholders are required to do from pre-design to operations. So those are some diagrams there. And again, this is all within the BIM execution plan. Then we have, again, integrating, this is just it's an integrated BIM execution plan. Here we have the LOD matrix, not so much describing the extent to which you model, but what we found is other LOD matrices are too complex in terms of modeling. We prefer keeping it at an LOD 300 to 350, but the data, LODI, level of data information, that goes through the roof. So within the BIMX plan, we have defined data structures that are required as a deliverable. So these are all the various categories or asset types where we've defined the data structure, and literally it's printed out within the BIM execution plan, all the required data parameters that are required. LODI 300 are for the design and documentation for the AE members to required to fill in the models. LODI 400 is manufacturing information by the contractor and subcontractor, and LODI 500 is operations and maintenance data, again defined as a requirement deliverable in the Revit model. Now, if I zoom out, the next step is to then provide this data structure to the AEC team members. So an owner gets Collectus. This entire structure is now made available to all the AEC team members at no cost. I mean, they literally start building the models. There's a library of 36,000 components across all trades, metric and imperial. There's workflows of how this Collectus data is made available to all the team members, and for them to check the models. There's mechanisms of checking the models as well. There's standards for all the templates. There's standards for building new content. There are standards for actually auditing the model and checking the model. There are user manuals inside of it. Again, our best practice workflows. And then there are schedules built inside the software to load these schedules. This is all in the cloud now. The models stay where they are in whatever silos these teams are using, whether it's BIM 360 or ACC, but they have access to all this structure all in the cloud. Now, from the owner's perspective, the third part of this is the mechanism of validating the models. That's the key, is that the owner needs a mechanism without being BIM experts to make sure that these models are data compliant with the BIM execution plan. So here in the BIMX plan, these team members can actually, first, they can expose the BIMX plan on all the required documents right inside the Revit model for the team members to view. Here in terms of these diagrams, this is where the contractor and subcontractors are required to fill in their required LOD data, 400 and 500, post-construction, to make sure that they're actually implementing those into the models. And here, there's a mechanism within Collectus to audit the model if they drop a component that's not compatible because it doesn't have the right data structure. it flags it. And then here we have the ability of the owner to check and validate the schedules that match the list of parameters inside the BIM execution plan. And these schedules are loaded within Revit. So they can be loaded at any time for the LOD 3, 4, and 500 for the owner to check, again, without being BIM experts. And there's also, we have a partnership with the CSI, Construction Specification Institute, where we actually have master format, uniform, and OmniClass loaded into the models automatically, a batch creation. So again, that's why you see the CSI logo up here as part of that workflow built into the program. And of course, the intention now is once the owner now has validated the models, they receive the models at handover, now they are data rich, and the data is sitting inside. We've proven that these models aren't bloated because we try to reduce the how the models are modeled in terms of keeping the modeling at a low level of LOD3 or 350, but the data is rich, so that you can see the data structure that's here, you can see the data structure that's here, and at that point, within literally hours, it can be loaded into, as an example, Onuma system as a digital twin. And from there, you have access to this data on a handheld device. And of course, these graphics go back to what's possible once you have data-rich models, the kind of reviews you can do with AI. And those same graphics are over here as well, where we've taken these data-rich models and brought them into AI for review. So again, this is one perspective of creating an environment where the owner can be proactive, defining a data structure, and provide the owner a mechanism to validate the models. I think that's the key that owners are looking for, is to validate the models without being BIM experts. Come on, what do you think? What are your thoughts?
Oh, we can hear Mike's lips, but we don't hear him.
Uh-oh, Mike is muted.
First, yeah. But yeah, that was great, Cyril. So one point I'd like to reinforce, we're showing a lot of our tools, obviously, but we're also showing connections to others, and we really invite others to jump in. And one thing that's pretty exciting for this BIM, we do this for every BIM storm. What you're seeing here with these models, we're talking about models here, BIM. This is actually going to be accessible to those that sign up. We have a BIM server with the actual model, with the actual data, with the actual assets, with all of that stuff that's going to be accessible to be linked to. And that's what Anto is going to be showing next.
But
So
before you go on to Anto,
yes,
Cyril had the perfect use case. The owner said,
yes.
have the information work together. So owners, it's up to you. It's possible. They're doing it. And the second thing is, Kimon's been doing these BIM storms for more than 15 years. And yes, he shows his own information and his own software. It's his tools. It's his instrument. He's going to play it. But he's not saying only use Onuma system. He is saying use an open, secure system for using standardized data. Cyril went through a great list of how the standard data from many organizations can flow together. And we're just so happy to be in a platform for you to be able to say these things.
Yeah. And actually, if the owner requires data to be machine readable in an open format or an open standard format, literally, and this is, we've done a lot of studies on this and others have quoted this too. And then Cyril, you kind of touched on it. The transition from, oh, we finished the design and construction, now we want to go into operations. It's not going to take 6 to 18 months to go out and send teams to gather the information from the field of what's this air handling unit. It's in the model. So we want to transition that immediately into operations, so the people that are actually moving into the building can actually use it. And absolutely the only way to do that is with these open connections and not thinking of file transfers only. I mean, we do have to do file transfers sometimes and obviously all that stuff, which is fine. But the more we can automate that mundane, oh, we're giving you a bunch of stuff, is it in the right format? Now where we put it, if that doesn't come from the owner's contract requirement, is going to be delivered in PDFs and stacks of, we don't use CDs anymore, but it's essentially the same. Here's a hard drive of stuff. What do you do with it? It's not really an asset anymore. It's just a liability because you can't match it to what's in the field.
Yeah, that's been the missing link is the structured data. That's what, they get these models. Owners, we hear it all the time. Owners receive these models and they shelve them. They don't know what to do with them. They dumb them down to CAD, or they just use a little bit of the BIM, or they're using, Excel files. We
But
found
when
that
you
this,
use an asset management governance, then you say that the data is an asset that we want to manage, then this is an approach to serve the owner in that way.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yep. So I'm transitioning to Anto now, if that's okay, but I want to
That's
kind of
perfect.
yes. So we set the stage here. There's a lot of great tools out there. Cyril gives some great examples. The technology is not really a problem if you use the right technology and the right way to basically communicate. And it's not just about our tools. We're just challenging the industry. It's all out there. The owner just had to put it in their contract. There's absolutely no reason to do things manually anymore. We have an actual use case, which I presented before, of the California community colleges as an owner that has 90 million square feet in a space inventory database, which we actually help them move out of just a few people accessing it and get a web API going so we can read it. And we actually linked our BIM server to it. So we linked it to location. And from there, we actually drill all the way down into spaces and equipment and assets. And there's teams that are working with their platforms on top of this. So there's this kind of, I'm not going to go through all the wiring here, but this is all the different types of tools, all the way from owners and GIS data and organizational data, and then field data and custodial planning and our system for space management and planning. And if you have servers like this sitting out there, Anto's going to show how you can take source data and start combining it into a format that becomes kind of an Internet of Things, and it makes it accessible to the end user. Because if you can't present it in the right way, you say, well, here's a stack of PDFs versus, or a stack of Excel files, or even a poorly formatted website, it's not as useful as a way to be able to make a use case that is valuable to the end user, right? Anto, I'm
Yep.
sure I'm saying the right things to introduce you here, but you can jump in and let me know. But yeah, it's pretty exciting. Yeah.
Can I share?
Yes, please do.
Oh, no, you can't. I've got to give you that permission. So just 1 second while I get back over to the ability to allow you to do that.
So as you're doing that, just reinforce what we showed all the way from the very beginning, right? It's all filtering up to be able to do this kind of advanced use of digital twins and then AI layered on top of it.
Okay, I think I'm sharing my screen now.
Yes.
Yeah, so the way I'm going to approach this is sort of thinking about this from a system of systems perspective. Organize my screen here. And really sort of system of systems, and then bringing in digital twins and AI as part of this. But my focus is going to be how that gets done at the building, at the edge of the cloud, in other words, in the building. So that's kind of the context. So the way that we've been talking about it on this call, and the way we have been thinking about it at C4SB, the Coalition for Smarter Buildings, is it's about solving this problem of domains and silos, right? Because as Mike pointed out, an asset is really made up of multiple silos, because each of the silos, especially in buildings, are actually the silos that allow certain things to happen, such as HVAC and fire and lights and all of the other things. So these are all the sort of operational technologies, or the OT that's in the building. And silos have been sort of, I've been in the integration space for about 30 years, so I've been doing this. Silos has been a bit of a problem, because everything in silos, everything in a silo typically reflect the protocols and the what happens in that silo, such as HVAC, lots of things like BACnet and other sort of field protocols. Right? So silos are necessary because they are the way that we have organized society to be able to do things well. Right? The reason why we have HVAC silo is that you go to HVAC school, you learn about HVAC. There's all the sort of best practices. We all know how that works. all of that happens in silos. Right? So the question is, how do we make the data in these silos go across silos? Because from an asset perspective, you're really looking at all of these silos as being your asset. So the approach, and this is really very much a system of systems kind of thinking, is to say these silos are really systems, right? These are the systems of the plurality of systems that is in a building. So it is a building that is made out of systems. And really what we want to do is we want the data to go across, to go between the silos, right? And a lot of the effort up to now has been trying to, let's say, use HVAC protocols in lights or use light protocol in HVAC. That's always been very difficult because if you're an HVAC person, you just think that way and you don't really think about other things like light and fire and other stuff, right? So our approach is that these connections that are depicted by the blue lines are really not HVAC and not lights or not fire or not any of the disciplines that's depicted by the silos. They're effectively sort of asset level information flow that goes between systems in this system of systems. So that's the way that we're thinking about this. And because our focus is very much on what happens in the building and how the building connects to the cloud, there is a problem there because there isn't a standardized way of doing that. Obviously, APIs and internet, that's okay. That's at a sort of technical level, but there isn't a one of the things that you always need to do when you're trying to do some kind of analytics or any kind of data manipulation about data in the building, the first thing you need to do is get the data from the building, right? So you install a gateway, right? So that's sort of the interface between cloud systems and the building has always been of a problem. So what we have actually been working on for the last couple of years is the thing called the IBB, which I'm going to introduce you and sort of show you how this works. And it's very much sort of a system of systems approach. So the IBB stands for an interoperable building box. That's kind of the name of it, right? And really it's a software stack that provides an interface between the building's network and the cloud, the internet cloud. And you see it depicted in the picture there. This is the IBB, it's in the building, and its head is stuck in the cloud, as it were. And what it does is it runs containerized applications, Docker apps, if you're Docker containers, right? Which is the normal way you do things in cloud native environments these days. That's what it does, right? So it's a software, IBB is a software stack that really essentially runs Docker apps. And what you do is you install this IBB either on a physical device, right? Or as a physical device that you would buy from somewhere, from a vendor of a device, or you would install it as a virtual system that's running in a on-prem VM, right? But always on-prem, either a physical device or virtual, it's always on-prem. Being on-prem removes all of the problems about the cloud connectivity, latency, reliability, and other things, right? So the IBB is always on premise itself. And in a way, what the IBB does is it makes the building cloud native. And the last part of it is that this is open source, so anybody can use it. And this is how it
Before you
works.
go on, Anto, can I just go over this so that everybody fully understands? This is really beautiful. We've known Anto for 14 years or so, and it's so good to be connected again. And what you've got is a coalition of providers who understand the problem the same way that you do, and came together with this box that allows an owner to have any asset that has connectivity connect to this box, and it becomes a universal translator that allows the owner to understand the systems of systems that are operating their building.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, give another perspective on this because it's really important. It's a great concept. I'm glad you're a coalition because we want to connect our network with your coalition. I think that some good things can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the vision. There's actually a lot more subtlety in the vision that I'll talk about, but that's really kind of solving a problem. The Coalition for Smarter Buildings, which is the organization that you're referring to, was stood up basically to identify barriers for broader adoption of smarter buildings, right? And we saw this as being a barrier, so we tackled it. That's what this is. Right? So the IBB works slightly different to how things normally have worked before, right? So this is a sort of a walkthrough of how that works. So this is an instance of an IBB installed in a building, fictitious building in Austin, right? And you can imagine that this IBB has a box that can have stuff installed in it, right? So you can imagine that a BAS system could be installed in it. From any of the vendors, any of the OEM vendors, right? And it will be connected to the backnet on IP or MSTP or whatever underneath it, right? So it's doing its stuff. It's doing its building automation stuff like normal. There could also be some other devices and systems in the building that are directly connected to IP. These are typically sort of large pieces of equipment like boilers and sort of package units that have the sort of the control systems inside the package unit. They just have an IP connection that they can expose data. So that's another sort of use case of IBB. There's also, over the recent years, been a proliferation of a lot of IoT stuff in commercial buildings, right? And so that needs to be brought into this picture. And IoT stuff tend not to go through the network of the building. It tends to find some other way, typically using 4G or 5G or some other thing, right? So that's kind of the architecture. So imagine this as being a building, and imagine that we now want to install an energy AI bot of some sort, right? So because the IBB allows you to install applications, you can do this in the IBB. You can say somebody has an application that you want to install, and off it goes. So how does this work in terms of how do they find each other? How does data start to flow? And the way the IBB works is that when this application installs itself, or when you install it, when it starts running, it makes a declaration. And the declaration in English goes something like, I can consume energy data about Acme HQ. Right? That's basically what it's saying. It obviously does that with sort of programmatic interactions, but in English, that's what it says. And it does that at the outset of this application, and it does that to a broker that's in the IBB, in the admin part of the IBB, there's a broker. So it makes that declaration. So the IBB says, okay, you can see here, Energy AI bot can consume energy data. Now, what it will do is it will look through all of the previous declarations that all of the other systems in this IBB has made when they were installed and when they started, and find things that are compatible and match. So this device down here could actually have made a declaration that says, I provide energy data about Acme HQ, right? So the broker says, okay, that thing can provide, that thing can consume, it connects, and data flows. No additional work necessary by anybody. It just does it. Right? And so the BAS could have done the same thing. It could have made a declaration that it can provide energy data, and it will be connected as well. And the IoT could do the same thing. Right? So all of these systems are now feeding data into this AI bot. And you can even go further to that, and you can actually then say, okay, because this is all cloud native, all of these applications behave as if they're in the cloud. You can then say, okay, there's a utility that can also have some influence data about energy data about Acme, so I can feed that in. Right? So again, this is what I would describe as a system of systems. There are multiple systems going on here. Right? Then they don't, they're each doing their own thing, but we've created this sort of overlay of blue lines that will enable them to work with each other while they can do their own thing. So the benefit gets extracted out of the blue lines into the asset owner, obviously, which is the person that we want to target. So this is how the IBB works, and this uses a cloud native, an open source technology called CNSCP, which I'm sure at some point we'll get into. The other thing that's really sort of important of all of this is that we're going through major transition in the world and also in the industry. Right? There's a lot of workforce challenges, right? And we're throwing a lot of technology into to these problems, right? But the workforce are not necessarily ready for it, right? So in the case of the IBB being predominantly for HVAC kind of type of stuff, we want to make sure that the IBB can be installed by an HVAC engineer. And that's why we've structured it this way. So we think about it as a box because HVAC engineers are comfortable with that. They're comfortable with ordering a box from whoever their vendor is, and then screwing it onto the wall, plugging network and power, and then they're up, right? We want the IBB to have the same experience while allowing DevOps type people, obviously different skill set, to do things differently, to install things in their data center that's in the building. They would probably go down the GitHub route or whatever it is. So we made sure that creating this, we are targeting the people who are actually going to make a difference in terms of deploying this. And we think that this approach is really important, not just for this, but for other sort of things. We have to sort of consider how things get deployed. So regardless of who installs it, you then get the IBB running. And with that, everybody's happy. And I'll just show one other thing, which is kind of the end result out of all of this. This is the PADI platform, which is the tool that we have. It's a cloud platform. And what we see here is some renditions of some apps and some assets that comes from Kimon. And really what we're trying to do here is to allow the creation of a UI, a sort of sophisticated UI that can have buildings, floor plans, and eventually this is relatively, this is very much work in progress, so there's not much depth to this right now, to what I'm showing you. But you should be able to then go to a specific floor or a specific area of the building and be able to understand what's going on with respect to the equipment that's actually in that floor or in that associated with that floor.
There can be color codes. Red would mean there's something that's going on with that, etc.
Yeah, and red could be occupied or not occupied. That actually comes from access control system or come from CCTV system or something else. It could be a utility demand response going on. So therefore, that area is being curtailed. So expect it to be a little bit warm, whatever it is, right? So what we want to do is we want to integrate the wonderful BIM information that you guys have with real-time data flows from real-time systems that's actually operating in these buildings. That's really the objective, bringing it all together.
Yeah, this is great, Anto. So one thing that I could interject here is that you introduced this to us several weeks ago, and within a few minutes, I started actually building an app and functionality and links in PADI, very basic stuff. And then we kept on kind of having conversations, not a lot actually, it was a few meetings that we had. And I was then able to even start connecting more to it. And then you built a new app just 2 days ago that links, which is what I think you're showing here. You're going back to our BIM server and linking live to our server with the graphics, which in other words, if that server, this is Collectus Tower, for what Cyril was talking about earlier for a new construction and delivery. But if that server had an update from the community colleges that I mentioned earlier, the name of the building change or the name of the room change or the size of the room change, you would see it immediately because all this wiring is kind of connected together. And that's the critical thing, that our industry is so complex. We can't rely on manual, I'm going to send you a file and we're going to import and export and synchronize. All of that is just old school. I mean, we still need to do that, but the more that we can create these live connections, it creates more certainty and ability from a digital twin perspective to synchronize as close as possible, not to real time, but at least to be current versus, well, what version of this floor plan are we looking at?
Yeah, and also be able to be flexible over the course of the life of the building, be able to have things change in it.
Exactly, yes. Yeah. Is it okay if I show my version of this real quickly?
Go ahead.
Yeah. because I wanted to show that I'm just still learning too, but using Patty, in fact, I've even embedded the website that we're using for the BIM storm, but we have the location here, and then we have even kind of a diagram of who's involved, and so it's a real mixture of stuff. In other words, including even links to our API. This is coming directly from our BIM server. Here's a building with spaces in it, right? And if we go down to what
Of
Cyril was,
course, that's a building with spaces in it. Can
Yeah.
everybody read
Oh.
program language like you, Kimon?
it's the springs and gears of the building, right? You don't need to see that, but it's in the background. But that's what drives that name of that space, and that's what drives the layout of the space. That's what drives the geometry of the space. That's what drives the ability to send a work order, which I pasted into the chat here. You can actually drive and see all this stuff and actually and there's other partners that are plugging in here as well. Here's DabbleFox with their custodial planning that is linked to the same database. So we're basically wiring all this stuff together and saying, just like we can call up an Uber, we want to call up a building and do something with it. And we want to see in real time, as much as possible, what's happening and have certainty with what the information that we're looking at. And with Patty, it's interesting because you can really mix and match different sources of information. So whether it's coming from us or from others, then all of a sudden you have location, you have geometry, you have other data, so our next step onto, I think, is we're talking about getting down to the asset level, right? So if we have the JSON, we're getting a little technical here, but if we have APIs and JSON and whatever the data accessible, then you can say, well, here's that air handling unit with a sensor on it that we want the AI to do an analysis of and give us some dashboard that gives us prediction of where we go in the future with this. We're just scratching the surface here, I think, but this is basically it, I think. This is the promise of the digital twin and the system of systems talking to each other.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So where are we? We're almost at the top of the hour, Mike.
Well, I think my camera is frozen,
Oh,
but can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah. We wanted to talk about next steps, I think, and we talked about having a session coming up.
So Kimon, since I'm having technical difficulty,
Yeah, I can take over. Yeah, that's fine. So we talked about a webinar, an ALN webinar. So we have the session next week in DC, right? Sign up at bimstorm.com.
June 20.
Nope, we lost your mic.
We have the session next week in DC, right?
We're getting lag. We're hearing the input from your side, but I'll keep talking here. Can everybody keep hearing me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
we can hear you.
Okay,
We can hear
good. So
you.
Mike, we're having problems with your connection. So I'll just have to mention that. This is on the fly, we're doing stuff here. But in June, on June 20th, there's going to be a session from ALN, Asset Leadership Network, that is going to show the results of what we do next week at NIBS for the Building Innovation session. And it will be posted on all our sites. So this is 6/20/24. We don't have a link yet, but hold the date and watch your messages, and we'll have a follow-on webinar after the session in DC on the 24th, which will also be broadcast on Zoom. You don't have to pay to log in remotely. This is the only session of BI that you can jump in on without registering for the conference itself. So I think, Mike, I'm going to have to wrap this up since your digital twin is frozen there, but oh, you're back.
Did it work? I restarted. Okay, sorry for the technical difficulty. Thank you, Kimon, for joining. Anto, that's a great use case. Cyril, that's a great use case. Zara, thank you so much for what you're doing with NIBS to make these best practices available to everyone. And yes, Kimon. So we've got next week. There is a values and benefits from asset management program on Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern, featuring Parks and Recreation. And Chris Silkey from Portland, Oregon will be one of the presenters. Then on Thursday, we're going to do ALN Thursday at 3 live from the NIBS conference with people who we meet to help bring you the freshest information. And then on the 24th at 12:30 is the NIBS Brains and Bytes presentation, which will wrap up the 50th anniversary conference of the National Institute of Building Sciences and really be the stepping stone for further exploration of what owners and their providers can do to solve seemingly intractable problems. And we'll be picking that up again on Thursday at 3 on June 20th to report on what was developed, see who has also joined in and is sharing use cases and showing everyone what is possible today. Kimon, you've always been great at showing what is possible today. Really appreciate it. Anto, after so many years, I am not surprised that you're step in step with Kimon, and I love to see where your unification goes. And Zara, with NIBS, look forward to working with you next week. Cyril, always great to see how you and your digital twin Kimono Numa work together. So
Thank you, Mike.
And we'll end this here with an AI generated song that we've been playing with last year. It's a country song, so those that don't like country, just turn your ears off.
Just leave.
But it's kind of.
Cold steel in hand,
Thanks for joining.
hard hat on crown.
See you next week.
Them storms
Be
with
safe.
AI, they're breaking new ground. And wheels are turning, circuits entwined. With every tick, they're ahead of their time. Digital scheming, metal and might. Together they're building
guys.
the future so bright. With brains and
Thank you,
bytes,
Mike.
the future
you,
is
Mark.
tight.
Thank you, Anto. Thank you, Zara.
thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Building innovation.
I like your
sparkling
music. I
light,
just have to.
light.
Hey,
He's got
even
the use
Kimone's having
case
fun
ready, but
using
can he refine with AI partner?
about work
Them
process
storm
and
walks
BIM.
the data line.
Look forward to more on that, I promise you.
Springs are jumping into action.
Yeah,
Show a new
I bet.
way. That
Okay.
lives
Take
the
care.
digital twins here. to
Ran over.
stay.
3 minutes, that's not normal.
In the heart of the
That's
machine,
not bad either.
the gear turns these forging paths of steel.
All right, bye guys.
that world
See ya.
breathes. Pushing through the grind, the sparks of thought fly. Where BIM storm and AI reach for the sky. Springs coil with precision, each
How do we do?
master's dream.
On, that's
The
okay.
dance
It's,
of
update.
invention, they're a perfect team. Year by year, the future's being spun. Fine-tuned tech under a rising sun.
Okay, Mike, thank you.
Thank you.
AI